Is that what underperforming is now? It's a Pioshik performance.
No, I think that
Man.
technically Pioshik always performs kind of bad, so it wouldn't be an underperformance. It
Oh.
would just be average. I shouldn't be attacking Pioshik this much, but yeah, like
Not if you want Mir to stay on TLC, you shouldn't.
Yeah, right.
true.
Seriously.
That's true.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Salt Mine. This is Season 2, Episode 2, where we have just gotten through week number 1 of the Summer 2023 NACL. We've lost one member since last week, but we are coming back with the 4-man panel. We've got Slayer, Nyarko, TDS, and myself, Gordo, joining on for today's little breakdown of the first 30 games of the NACL. First things first, guys. We have 6 less games that we have to watch each week versus last split, which on the one hand feels bad because we have less teams overall, but on the other hand, it does make this a little easier to get through in a day. How have you guys been feeling about the new schedule so far?
I'm enjoying it partially because I am also coming from a very different perspective. As these guys know, I was finishing up a degree for the first split of North American Challengers League, so already out the gate, it was very overwhelming, and was part of the reason why I was absent for a lot of these Salt Mine episodes. So it feels a lot more manageable now for me, but I also don't have a collegiate course load on my hands, so take it with a grain of salt.
There we go.
This is more work than any class I took in grad school, is what I'm going to say, Slayer. I think that the biggest issue with this is that I still am behind on games, and now I feel worse about it because there's less games to be behind on, yet still I continue to lag. So hopefully I'll be able to get my reps up and whatnot. But with LCK and whatnot also broadcasting, I do want to keep an eye on the international scene.
Yeah, I'm already kind of addicted anyway to watching games. So like, it's a Tuesday to me. I watch this, I watch LCK, I watch LCS, I watch football. Everything can be get in between. It's easy.
Yeah, for sure. I'm between the 15 games of LCS a week now too. I'm just gonna still be constantly slumped in behind, and then plenty of NACLQ games to keep covered as well. But still, enjoy the new format. Like that, we get to at least be talking about every team potentially being eligible for relegation, and it's definitely going to be a long season, but one that should be filled with plenty of good games. And I do like that we don't have that awkward split now where some teams play 3 games and other teams only played 2 games. It always made the calculus for player of the week super weird. It made the calculus for like who had a good week, who had a bad week super weird. And now at the very least we get to bury that behind us, and we get to see each matchup twice rather than just having, you know, one team play each other and they might have even 2 or 3 players different when they play the first time versus when they like end of the season and meet later on playoffs. So we'll take it. We'll take the changes. We'll call them a net positive, even though we did end up losing a bunch of teams. But let's get into that player of the week discussion here, where we've had 3 matchups apiece from each team, 6 games from every player. Who do we feel like really stands out from week number 1 as somebody we'd want to give this award to? We were discussing beforehand. None of us have revealed our picks yet, but I suspect that there's going to be a front runner who gets a couple of votes here. But let's see who's brave enough to step up first and give who their selection's going to be.
I'll do it over here. This box is too small, even with only 4 people. So
You're just taking up too much of the box, man. It
That's
takes
true.
It's really hard to actually fit your camera in there.
Look,
Never get enough Nyarko.
there's so many issues with my camera from like a broadcast setting as well, where I need to get it centered on my screen, and there's no way for me to do that because of the way that my ceiling kind of overhangs and stuff like that. And so I'm kind of stuck with it on the stand off to the side, and so I can't make eye contact with you lovely people either. But that's enough waffling about the production side of things. I'll be moving soon, so hopefully that'll be fixed, and now I will be more centered and also further back than everybody else. But right now, you could look at my big old melon head saying that I think it's APA as player of the week.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I think it's undoubtedly his teammate Mir. So that's my pick. Let's let everyone get him out before I divulge.
I'm on the Mir train as well. I'm on board for Mir all day, every day.
Interesting. So you have a 2-2 because I'm also with Nyarko. Mine is APA as well.
Wow, TDS picking APA. Who saw that one? I'm kidding. No, I mean honestly, like I went into this in my head like, all right, as long as it's a TL member, honestly, for being real, and B, that duo was absolutely terrorizing the first week. I love to see the APA Nautilus tech, and it really fooled the couple of the games and the teams they played. It was just like everybody was so focused on APA running around on Nautilus, they kept trying to blow them up. Specifically, Maryville in game 1, there were 3 times where I was like, why are they trying to blow up a tank Nautilus mid? And they just end up getting rolled in the fights. I only pick Mir because I think he showed his usual champion diversity and the fact that he could carry, like hard carry, in that Nautilus mid matchup, not only on Kindred, which you'd expect, but even did it later in Graves, where he just ran away with their final series. I just feel like it's Mir, but I totally also back the APA pick. It makes a lot of sense. They were the 1-2 punch.
I'll reach across the aisle. It's the same thing for me. I think that my secondary pick would be Mir. The jungle mid continuity for TL was really the focal point of every single series that they played in. And while I think that it's justifiable to go either way, perhaps it's specifically around Nautilus that I vote for APA over Mir, because Mir had one game on Nautilus jungle, right? And it was the one where he like went 0-5 versus DSG, and that was the one that they split, I believe, with that team, the only loss on the week. So maybe then, given the fact that we saw so many other big performances on Nautilus, but in the hands of AP, I thought, I'm just going to go with whoever the better Nautilus was.
Yeah, and I think the way that to bring that up for me with APAs, it's something that I remember I mentioned in the first play where TL was struggling horribly and they were not looking that great. And it's the fact that TL depend quite a lot, or at least to a certain degree, on what APA can find to try and put for the team. Like, he's the one that makes a lot of the plays, or in a lot of senses, not necessarily start fights, but makes fights happen in a way that TL can win them. And I think that is a huge advantage that brings forth a lot of the possibilities for Mir to be the hard carry. Obviously, not taking away from Mir, I think that he is one of the best junglers, if not the best jungler in the league as of now. And APA enables him to go even farther with that, but he also enables the rest of the team. I think that the team moves around so well what APA can find, that's why, even if it's not Nautilus, if it's on the Ari, on any of these other champions, the Twisted Fate, I think, particularly was such a good pick from him, and he was able to bring forth such a good amount of strength from TL, that is why I think that he's now showcasing even more, because the team can back him up. And then, obviously, the team is one of the most cohesive ones. And I think that it goes to show as well when you see the team fighting. But a lot of that revolves around what APA can do and obviously what Mir can do as well.
I'm glad you shouted out the TF from APA, because that was disgusting.
That was such a good one.
He had the static shiv and rapid fire cannon, and he had Hex Tech Soul over top. Dude was half healthing whoever he wanted with one yellow card.
Yeah, for sure. I actually think the TF almost counts as points against him for me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love to see another APA champion coming through here, but I think it's really the loss of or not really the loss, but like it's just another new the lack of raw mechanical skill that it takes to operate the Twisted Fate, and the fact that I think he's kind of just walking in, gold carding people, setting up for Arrow and Mir to be able to play out their team fights the way they want, and Bradley as well, who has a couple of really solid Kennen games in there, and I do love to see that there's a kind of new APA champion, though. Like, it feels like all last season there were these picks that he was playing that nobody else was playing. It was the Cassiopeia, and it was the Ziggs, and now I'm going to add the Twisted Fate to that list because he's the only one playing it, and he's making it look quite good and making it look like it should be a priority. Drew a ban, at least one ban on it. I would not be surprised if there was more than one ban, and I may have missed one somewhere along the way. But definitely going to be a pick of his to watch going forward, and going to be another thing in that champion pool that you just have to pay really close attention to for APA. I think he's leading the pack for mid laners so far and should continue to do so. But I have to give it to Mir. I mean, that Graves performance was so fantastic. I think his Vi games were very solid. I think he's kind of a cut above some of the other Vi's in the league, and I know that's another point and click, ignore everybody else champion, but a lot of his really on-point vault breakers, his flash vault breakers ended up making a lot of big differences, making a lot of plays happen, and yeah, I'm still, after having watched Pioshik play one game of LCS now, I'm still on the Mir for LCS train, I'll tell you that much.
Dude,
I honestly hope not. I don't want them to destroy TLC. My hopes are on them, not on the TL actual squad. I hope that they don't break up this. I was also going to say, like, just to not leave it as a TL only vote, like, I wanted to shout out as well. I think Young from DSG had a really good week, even though DSG are still like below this from TLC. They had a pretty good showcase on the first week. Him and I think Fakeout as well had a really good first week, even though they are not on the like first position. They are still doing a really good job, and I think those are two players that I would want to shout out as well.
I'm glad you do that too, yes, because I was about to ask if anybody wanted to shout like an underrated sleeper pick they had. I was gonna go mine. I know we'll get into it later. I think Music has had a lot of really solid performances for Supernova. I think he's the main catalyst why they're doing better than a lot of us predicted out the gate through 1 week. So I want to shout out Music because he also had some very good Vi games. Took over in one game against Wildcard, who were coming into that matchup like in top 3 position too in the league. So if I had to pick a sleeper, Music is a good one, but the DSG shoutouts as well as solo laners is a great one.
Yep. Nowhere near a sleeper because he's getting named as a starter or as a main roster member, not as a starter. But I think Shaden had a great week as well. Not quite the consistency that I saw out of Mir is what ends up costing him the pick there, but I thought Shaden had a really good week as well, and Shaden had some other issues to deal with around the map, we'll say. Whereas I think Mir got some really solid performances out of all of his teammates. So a little shout out is in order there.
Yeah, that's fair. I was looking at AoE. I actually enjoyed Darkwing's performance quite a bit. They had a few standout pop-off games that
all mids and junglers today.
The team, yeah. I mean, that's just kind of what it's like in the meta right now. It's the same thing happening bot every single game. I guess I could shout out Lynx if I wanted to also kind of focus upon, some other part of the map. But, when the 80 carries are grabbing the same picks and therefore kind of playing the same way from person to person, I got to look at the little variations that come through elsewhere on the map,
It's funny you say Dark Wings. If I had to name the next guy I would shout out on AoE for their great week, it would be Will. So it's mid jungle again.
Fair enough.
It would be Will for me too. I mean, but let's get into some of the teams of the week. Let's start off with, we were talking about Shaden a little bit. Let's talk about EG. Kind of surpassing a lot of expectations here, except for maybe Bonfire, God forbid. As EG actually sitting top 2 right now, top 3 I suppose, as they're kind of tied all in all with Disguised as well at that 4-2 record. Really coming back after what was a frankly garbage spring split. We talked plenty of shit about that last week. Now coming in to be sitting towards the top of the league off of the back of a pretty solid week 1 performance. How do we feel about Evil Geniuses, and what do we feel like the big differences have been?
Well, technically they have the same roster, so you could argue that this should be, and no, I'm going to correct myself. They have their actual roster, so this should be a better EG, right? On paper, we talked about the possibility that because now they do actually have their roster, they can actually play to a good enough degree that they can put a good enough performance. And I feel like they've been doing a really good job. Particularly, I think botlane has been a really nice showcase from them. Even though they didn't go the full way and get the first place and took the whole league by storm, I think that a really good first week showing, botlane looking solid. I still think Soul and Shaden are 2 of the rockiest parts because I do think that they have a better performance already than their spring, but they are 50-50 sometimes. And that can be scary in a lot of situations. So if they can correct that, I can see them being a bit higher in general. But as of now, I'm glad that they are able to bring this turnaround and that they are able to at least bring up a fight against the expected top 3. I wouldn't put them against the top 3 just yet. I still have high hopes for FlyC and DSG, but they are entering that step towards that.
Yeah, I agree on the bot lane point for sure, and it feels really bad too because our whole refrain all of spring was, no, it's not mobility's fault. It's not mobility's fault. Everybody stop blaming mobility. There's so much else wrong with this team, but oh boy, does King look way, way better coming in here, and he just has a really solid week 1 performance. I mean, if this was a rookie, right, if this was a player that hadn't played in an NACL before and they rolled up and had a performance like King this week, everybody would be losing it. But it's King, and he's been at this level before, so he doesn't carry that same level of excitement. But I think he had a great week. I mean, I have very few criticisms for him. Even in their losses to Wildcard, I think King looks quite good and is making quite a few plays. And I'm excited to see the rest of the season out of him in particular.
As the EG hater, I am going to try to defend at least some of what I did in my power rankings because boy, are things coming undone. Not only in terms of just where I thought these teams actually were going to be in regards to their power, but also where I wanted them to be in regards to my fandom. What I'm going to say is that I don't think EG have been truly tested yet, and clearly there has been some amount of wavering and getting back into the swing of things that you see, not even within just the EG series that we watched, right? I look at Fear in particular as a team that is underperforming, but I think that this is going to be something that they're going to be able to pull themselves back from. Maryville University, to what extent they got exposed and kind of contributed to EG having such a great placement after this first week is kind of up in the air for me. But what I will say is that I'm tending more towards saying Maryville is not as good as I hope they would be, rather than saying EG is better than I think they are. So I want to see a few more games out of them. I want to see them more pushed, more tested going forward before I really start eating crow, as it were. And I guess now I'm really digging myself a hole, because I don't know if Maryville is going to improve, but if I'm also saying, actually, I was wrong on Maryville, but I'm not wrong on EG, and I turn out wrong on both, it's just going to be absolute misery for me for this season.
Well, there's a reason why we're all posted up against a salt wall, is because we contribute to the added salt as the season goes on, right? The salt one. No, I definitely think that's a great point to bring up, Nyarko. We hit a lot of the points on the head when talking about EG. I think they haven't been tested very well. I mean, like you mentioned, just to make sure, if any of the listeners don't know that their slate for this week off the top of their head, they played Maryville, Wildcard, and AoE. So you, at least going into the season, at least off of our power rankings, right? They didn't play a team, the net rank. I don't think any of those guys eclipsed the net ranking of 7, or maybe there's a 6th place for one of them.
I think at most 6th.
6th, yeah.
Wildcard ended up like net
AoE?
6th for us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
net 6th.
Okay, yeah,
So,
Wildcard, yeah.
yeah, so not above net 6 yet through three series. So certainly take it with a grain of salt. But I think the point about King is the one to hammer home, because it quite literally, to make a bit of a joke out of it, quite literally felt like that first series Maryville just watched tape on EG challengers with mobility, and then they went into that series like, oh, okay, yeah, we won't have to worry about AD carry. And then King just like the first or second game, that Zeri game he had where he just was literally unkillable. I think he ended up like 8-1 and something by the end of the game. Was definitely a tough watch as the guy that put Maryville 5. But definitely for the EG side, really showed some improvements. I can't wait to see them play Fear next week. I know we'll get into more of that later, but I feel like EG's the team where you're like, all right, they're overperforming a bit. Do we think they should stay here? And this is the test. And then Fear is on the other end. It's like, all right, they're underperforming, but do we think they can go up? It's like the perfect kind of matchup. They're both in a weird, different headspace. So regardless, though, at the end of the day, you beat who's in front of you, right? And EG did that week 1.
Well, and the big attribute there that I think is going to determine where they end up is going to be Soul, right? I do not know what to make of this guy anymore. I think, they slam Maryville in game number 1, match number 1, whatever you want to call it, number 1. And then they come up against Wildcard, and Zamudo just crushes Soul, I think. I think Soul also doesn't do very well against Niles in the Maryville game either. I recall over-aggressing on Gragas and dying under turret for a first blood in there once or twice, and really looks rough against Zamudo as well, who should be coming in here as a rookie, as this player playing his first real split of NACL, other than in that Proving Grounds matchup he got to do with AoE. But then he turns it all around. I mean, as does the rest of EG in match number 3 up against AoE. I think Soul actually looked very good there, does very well up against Concept, and, whereas I was gearing up on Monday to come on here and talk about how Soul just looks awful and has completely dropped off a cliff, now he's given me a little bit of hope, and now I don't know what to think.
It's the 50-50s, I tell you, it's there. It's a potential. We can see that maybe they can come through, but then you see the Pioshik performance, and then it falls off. And it's the risky part.
Is that what underperforming is now? It's a Pioshik performance.
No, I think that technically Pioshik always performs kind of bad, so it wouldn't be an underperformance.
Oh.
It would just be average. I shouldn't be attacking Pioshik this much, but yeah,
Not if you want Mir to stay on TLC, you shouldn't.
Yeah, right.
True.
Seriously.
That's true.
All right. Well, that's plenty said on Evil Geniuses. We'll be keeping eyes on them as we go into the next couple of weeks. Let's talk about Cincinatti Fear here a little bit, who look to be on a bit of a slump. I mean, we had this is like our consensus 4th team. Everybody was talking about them either being in competition for or being right inside that top 4. either being in competition with the top 3 or being right outside the top 3, much rather. And they come out looking hot and cold in week number 1. Where are we feeling on Cincinnati Fear?
It ended up being a bit with one of my main fears with them. I ironically said, or no pun intended. They didn't upgrade really with the players that they got. To me, it was a side grade at best, and it showed itself when the rest of the teams actually made changes that could impact the way that they played, or they just had a better roster to begin with. Then if you didn't really upgrade above that, you're not going to be able to go against them that effectively. And that's kind of my fear with Fear, once again, no pun intended. They don't have really anything that will push them farther against teams that did make changes. Obviously, there could be teams that make changes for the worst, and they could be below them. But if there's not a lot of teams like that, and there's actually only 2 teams that did that, they are not going to be above those teams. That's kind of the fear that I had with them. And looking at how the first week played out, it's not like they digressed in any way. They are still playing kind of similar. Obviously, Philip and I'm
JJ?
lacking on this word, and JJ still need to get accustomed to the team overall. But it's not like they digressed in any big way from their typical playstyle. It's just that I feel like the other teams do have more tools in them to try and get something out of them.
See, I actually come in pretty differently there, I think, actually. Coming off of this first week, I don't put too much of this on the subs, and I mean, obviously that impacts the synergy a little bit, and that could explain some of the wider issues that we're seeing. I think JJ especially looks actually quite good coming into week number 1. I think Philip's hot and cold. But I feel like I see a big underperformance from Manui, especially. I think Manui has a very rough week. He gets caught in a lot of strange situations. He does some crazy face checks into Rosethorn's Wukong to throw one of the games up against Taco. And just all in all, cannot seem to get his team fighting together. And Perry, I mean, just looks weaker than I expect Perry to look. It's really hard for me to put my finger on it. Maybe I have to go back and watch a lot of these early jungle games. But again, Team Fish Taco is what stands out to me. There's one game there where, again, Rosethorn Wukong just fully gaps Perry in the early game, just has a complete read on what's going on, built a huge lead for himself, gets a free first blood out of it, and it is just really hard for Perry to get into the game after that. He doesn't look like the worst jungler in the league by any means, but as somebody who kind of has Perry pegged as this guy who could take a big step up and could be like the next target for LCS teams, I was pretty disappointed in Perry's week 1.
I guess I also take a little bit of a different stance here. I do really like. I think where I've come away is I definitely agree with the point that Manui definitely disappointed. But I also found myself throwing a lot of question marks at how Philip was playing some of these games. You said hot and cold, Gordo. Maybe I just am zoning in on the cold games. Like that Maryville game on the Olaf, he was making a lot of really weird plays. Like
really indecisive, right?
Yeah, it was really. That's like you can't do that with Olaf.
And we're back after a little bit of an internet hiccup. Slayer, you were saying, my friend?
Yeah, my Discord, it was being as indecisive as it felt like Philip was being in the MU game on the Olaf. I was just talking about, I want to reflect on the, Gordo said the hot and cold from Philip in this week. I guess I might be focusing a little more on the cold, but his indecisiveness really showed for me. And I'm starting to feel like when we talked about Faisal for Philip as a sideways play, so far, at least week 1 reactions, it feels like it might have even potentially been a downgrade. He really got caught in that Maryville game a lot on that Olaf, taking like 1v1s without Ragnarok that he shouldn't have been, running into team fights, not popping Ragnarok, and then to do it halfway through after they lost Manui in the fight. It's like, if you're making Maryville look good in a matchup, as much as I don't mean to take this shot, sorry, Nyarko, if you're making Maryville look good at the end of the week, you've got some problems, and I felt like Philip was a lot of those problems for Fear. So I kind of want to not dogpile, but add that into the criticisms that we've already thrown.
I think if we're talking about where he was hot, just sorry to cut you off there, Nyarko, but if we're talking about where I think Philip had a good game, I think that game 1 against Taco, even though they do end up losing it, I think his Gragas like is a huge part of their comeback in the mid game there. Like again, that's the game where Perry gets completely taken out by Rosethorn's Wukong, and I think it's really Phillips' Gragas that pulls them back. So I mean, maybe that game alone is really carrying Phillip back up in my standings, but I do agree that Olaf game was a rough one.
And best of twos are a pretty volatile format. I think that they are underperforming for sure. There are games where they're making mistakes that they simply shouldn't. And for me, a lot of that weight is on Minui, like you guys have already highlighted. But what I will say is that we're going to be getting a shakeup in the bot lane. Zeri's getting nerfed. I imagine that we're going to get more changes as the season progresses, as this is kind of the target of a lot of people's ire and pro play. That entire lane just has a very set in stone kind of meta that I'm sure people are going to change and address. And maybe that kind of alteration will be enough to open back up upon something that Minui's a little bit happier playing in. And just in general, the being caught out, the kinds of mistakes that we see out of here, I think are ones that you expect from a team that might be a little bit rusty, just coordinating and working together. And especially when you just look at the bot lane two-player kind of dynamic that you have, JJ's new, or at least coming into this team and has to adjust to playing with Minui, right? So that is something that I want to see Fear address, but I'm not going to throw my hands up just yet and say that we misplaced this team. I think that they just simply need to be able to bring it back and prove it in future weeks. So I guess that I'm kind of on the same trajectory as I am with EGC, which is we just got to wait to see how they perform in the future. But I'm more optimistic for them than I am for EGC, I guess, on that front.
It's always important to mention it is week one, so take literally everything we have with the many grains of salt we provide on this podcast.
Yeah, from the mine.
From the mine. From the mine. As let's get a little bit more positive again, though. We talked about AoE and Supernova both in there a little bit, as we've talked about both of them a little bit already, but I think both of them come in with really surprising weeks for everybody. I think quite a few of us had them lower. Some of us were a bit higher on AoE than others, but Supernova I think we were pretty universally low on, and they really come in and surprise everybody. I think we already highlighted the junglers a little bit, and I think that's probably going to be my primary area of focus here. I think both Music and Will come out looking great. Both of them having not been in the league last split, Will having not been playing competitive at all last split, but having been one of those hyped prospects for a while. I think both come in, take the league by storm. Both have some fantastic Vi performances. Music stamps his mark on the league as having his Volibear be something that needs to be respected, and a great run for both of these guys.
Yeah, honestly, I would go a bit up, particularly with Supernova. I think Quacker was one of the players that impressed me the most in how he came. I'm glad that he got the chance to play it, because he played really, really well. I'm thinking about like top laners right now in the league that are making a good impact for the team, and he immediately jumps up. Obviously, he's not above the top laners, but he's making a really good case to start off. He's trying to put his name out, and I think that with this sort of performance, he's going on the right direction. And having a top lane and a jungle that can perform really well, especially since we're going to talk about the potential shakeups of the meta coming forward, can be a really positive trend to have moving forward. So I'm glad that this is something that SN has, and if they can keep performing, can be something really, really positive for them.
I love having noticed something the TDS noticed, because he's the Giga Brain around here. So yeah, I was gonna say Quacker. I love agreeing with TDS. I think Quacker had some standout performances. I think his Cassante was really clean alongside Music, especially in their series. And make sure I get this one. In their series against Wildcard, because that was a banger series, and a lot of the reason why Supernova were able to sort of carry through the storm that was that game too early and in that mid game was because Quacker and Music kept making plays towards the top side. So I really liked. I would say Quacker is a good shout out. I'm just kind of, I'm definitely kind of like the sad boy boat that Nyarko is about Maryville, because I quite literally had these two teams 9 and 10 respectively. So we're sitting here going through, and they are much higher than expected. I'm honestly happy about it, because these are, this is like Supernova and AoE. We're not talking about TL's challenger roster and Fly's challenger roster surprising you. It's teams that just made it up here and are still kind of newfound names in the NA scene that don't really grab your Reddit thread attention on the title. So I'm happy to be wrong about it so far, and I'm really excited to just continue to watch Quacker, because also just a goated League of Legends name is Quacker. That's just come on, like top 10. It's got to be.
For sure here. I also want to highlight Robbie Bob a little bit as well. I think he looks very different this week than he looked on Evil Genius's last split during his time subbing in. And I don't really know what it is, because it's like, in a vacuum, you want to say like, oh, he's got all this confidence after running through Seawall, or after how well he was able to do with Team Fish Taco in their run through NACL Q's last split, and you want to go for all these default narratives, but it's like Robbie Bob's been around so long that none of that feels appropriate. I don't know. He's just showing a different layer here, and he and Music as a duo have very much impressed me, especially in that game 1 up against Wildcard. I would not have pegged Music and Robbie Bob as like being able to just totally gap Keel and Soligo in the 2-on-2. I would not have thought that was something that would happen in week 1. It definitely happens in game number 1, Supernova versus Wildcard, and I think they've been pairing up really well as a duo throughout the whole weekend. So definitely going to be a mid-jungle pairing that I have my eyes on going forward.
And I think that there's something really fitting and heartwarming about the fact that we have AoE and Supernova closing out this first week with a 3-3 record apiece, kind of showing that there's still plenty of time for them to compete versus one another by virtue of, having each other's matchups in a way. And I'm happy that we also opened on a series between the two of them as well that went 1-1 itself.
For sure.
It was very fun. I just want to quickly bring up, because you mentioned Gordo, that game 1 against Wildcard. That if we gave it an award every week for wackiest draft or like weirdest like 5v5 set, I don't know how Supernova got the champion. Wasn't that game like the one where they had Robbie Bob on Nico and they also got Quacker on Casante?
Yep.
Like on 13.11, if we're talking about solo lane champions you want to try and B1, Nico is arguably the top one in mid, and Casante has consistently been the one in top. So I just remember watching that game back. I'm like, if Supernova lose this game, man, I'm not ever letting them out of 10th. And, well, they smashed the draft.
They're free. They're unleashed.
They're free. They're unleashed from my dungeon.
Yeah, for sure. Hang on, wait. Let me look at this draft, because I remember what you're talking about, and it's like it doesn't even end there. They have Zeri Lulu too.
Yeah,
and they have the Vi, so
Yep.
they don't give up the Vi counter pick for the Zeri. I don't understand how this draft happened.
Yeah,
They were limit testing Gordo. That's why.
Wildcard was? Surely.
Yeah, they were probably just trying to see how far they can go against the best champions in the meta.
Yeah, they came in.
Not
They
far.
came to that matchup 3-1 too. So like, if they hadn't just blown that draft, we potentially could be talking about them at first. Because who knows how that series looked too if they don't just blow that game 1 draft open.
True.
Yeah, I mean, game 2 was really close. Yeah, I mean, if both of those games are different, if we're gonna go for alternate history, the Wildcard could be 5-1 here. They give you with Team Liquid,
Yeah.
and then EG isn't even in second, and we have to change the first section of our show. It's
True.
a different world. It's a
Would have
different
been really
world.
fun.
Speaking of different worlds, though, one world that has stayed the same is Maryville's world, and is Nyarko's world, really, coming in here as an NACL pundit, as the team that you support continues to sit down here at the bottom. They get their 1 win way early this time, though, so we can get a little hyped about that. But Maryville, maybe even worse than we thought here, I'm going to say. Coming in with a really rough week number 1, 1-5, getting given 1 for free there by Cincinatti Fear at the very end, and even that one is hard fought. What do we think's been going wrong for Maryville?
I feel like we just all should leave, right? Like, just leave Nyarko. I'm
sulk?
gonna get up. Nyarko, yeah, you can just take over, man.
For the third time running, though, on this episode, I'm just going to say we got to wait and see, guys. It's not over just yet, okay? There's still plenty of time for this team to develop. But, man, what a slap in the face that first series was in retrospect, It was proven to me that EG wasn't all that, They split a game with Maryville, and they were looking okay, but it was just downhill from there. I don't even really know what it is, man. I think that they just kind of got draft gapped in a few separate games. I really did not like the way that they were picking into TL in particular. I think that was kind of a suffering full series, but at the same time, what I'm saying here is that I never expected them to beat TL to begin with, so that being one of their matchups, the other one being split between them and EG, kind of just leaves one series where I really am sad with how things have gone.
They split with Fear. They split with Fear.
Oh, did they split with
EG.
Fear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, who split with EG?
Taco, wasn't it?
Taco did.
Taco, yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
no! Oh yeah, I'm thinking about the
Sure.
wrong thing. Okay, yeah, no, EG 2-0s them at the start of the weekend.
Correct.
Ah, crap.
Yeah, EG didn't
Well-
split with anybody. They
Oh,
got
you
2-0'd
didn't split
by
with anybody. They
Wildcard.
2-0'd,
Yeah.
0-2'd, and then 2-0'd.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I mean. Yeah, no, Maryville just got 2-0'd. So still
Correct.
a slap in the face. Just I'm not remembering it properly. Oh my god. Well, you know, the gravitational singularity of my Maryville University fandom has warped my ability to realistically perceive anything in the NACL at this point. So I don't know. Fact of the matter is they can improve, I think. They're going to have easier matchups going forward to a degree, especially if EG actually is all that like people are talking about. So that's my hope. I'm going to withhold full despair and judgment as, you know, at the end of the day, my goals do change. I shift goalposts quite a bit in regards to my expectations for teams. And so, you know, for CLG, eventually the expectation just became, hey, we're eventually going to win another game. And that happened all the way in playoffs. So if that has to be my goal for Maryville University at the end of the season, so be it, right?
I was going to say, I felt like this already happened last split with CLG Fate, Nyarko.
We've been here before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know. Don't remind me.
It feels similar. Yeah, Nyarko just trying to give us hope that it's not going to be delivered. Probably. We don't know yet, but probably.
And then I had to cast Bajani losing against Mirage for the NACL qualifier just to really hammer home just how terrible
Yep.
things have been for, you know, the people that I root for.
He had a good
It's
run
been
the
rough
rest of
time,
the
guys.
weekend, though. Give him.
It was, but was I there to cast it? Absolutely not, Gordo.
No. No.
I'll never forget the way that I get reminded about Maryville's weekend was that me and Gordo took some time to VOD watch together, which by the way is probably like I can't wait to keep doing that. Just VOD watch with these guys. That'll be more fun.
We
But
gotta
I was
start
just- we
streaming. It'll be fun.
Yeah, we should actually. We could delve into that. But I mean, it was just me and Gordo sitting there going against TL the series, which, like you said, Nyarko, I did want to say, they're playing TL Challengers week 1, so it's like, do we expect them to win? No, but did me and Gordo find ourselves going, what the hell, multiple times, and especially that game 1? It was rough. To give a silver lining, I think the game 1 against TL, they should have lost at 24 minutes, but Niles
Yep.
had a pretty good Cassante game. He single-handedly like kept that game alive for like 12 more minutes. That was a really nifty teleport. He TP'd in the Baron pit and just Mir, I guess, forgot what Cassante does and got thrown out of the pit. And Auto Orange stole. Yeah,
that
remember
was
that
a
Auto
Baron
Orange.
steal.
Yeah, the Baron steal, and then Auto Orange goes to Mountain Drake and steals it on a beautiful flag and drag combo. Mir gets knocked up. So Auto Orange and Niles, mostly Niles though, in that game had a really good Cassante performance. It just felt like the rest of his team was really lacking. My problems, unfortunately, revolve a lot around get back. I you know, the way we talked about Manui getting caught in like spots who's like weird, like why are you here? It's a lot of what I saw from Get Back. There's just too many moments where I was like, why is this your target selection? Why is this your positioning? And you're just giving too many openings, especially to TL, that you just cannot give over. And it was rough.
Yeah, rough weekend for Maryville all around. I will say I spent a lot of time cooking narratives, and Nyarko, I got some copium locked and loaded for you, man. As I got a couple of suggestions, a couple of potential explanations for why Maryville's struggling here. One that is that I think actually might hold a little bit of salt here. Actually, now that I think of about it, I have 3, but one that I think is most valuable, is most potentially reasonable, is they did just play CLOL Finals a week ago. And arguably, like, that was the big moment they were working their whole season for, you know, and obviously I don't know exactly how they do their goal setting, but I would think if I'm Maryville University coming into 2023, our goals are win CLOL number 1, maybe qualify for NACL number 2, and then, you know, maybe number 3, number 4, number 5, way down there is like, number 3 is probably like make CLOL finals, like, you have to probably go a ways down before you reach perform well in week 1 of NACL. And it would not surprise me if like there's a little burnout contributing there. You know, these guys were probably seriously amping up for those CLOL finals that we're now only a few days away from. So
Also, the patch difference too, right? That's what
true.
we're talking
That's like a
about.
little bit of patch whiplash too. Yeah, they played CLOL finals on the MSI patch, and then jumped ahead 4 patches for NACL week 1. So
We'll say quickly though, which one of those goals is not get relegated? Because at this pace, they are going to be in that race.
you can't
That is
have
something to
don't get
consider.
relegated until you make NACL. So it probably
Yeah, maybe
wasn't
that
even on the
changes to
docket.
2. Yeah, maybe that's 2 now. Well,
Uh,
now it's probably 1, but
Maybe.
before
It should
CLOL
be
finals.
1.
Should be 1. Should be up there for sure. Win CLOL next year maybe is getting in there a little bit. That said, they are also the other one is I do think, because there were high expectations for Maryville in some ways, because they come in as having been this super dominant NACLQ team, right? They were the best team in the NACLQs. So in a vacuum, you would think that they would be at least middle of the pack, because they should be better than all the teams they beat out. So they should be better than a Team Fish Taco. They should be close to an AoE. They should be better than Disguised in a vacuum, given that Disguised just got promoted up. But they aren't. And I do think part of that, right, is that clearly the roster consistency rule was suspended for this split, and we talked about that last episode too. And I think, like, if Team Fish Taco and Supernova are running the rosters they qualified with, and Disguised is TikTok Tony Top, then I think then, like, Wildcard looks a lot, or not Wildcard, Maryville looks a lot better relative to the competition. But I think, like, every other team got to, like, rebuild out of the scraps of the implosion of Academy, and Maryville did not. Maryville got to run it with the roster that they qualified to a 16-team league with way weaker bottom 6 teams, too. And I think that hurt. Like, I think that just sets them up for failure a little bit. At the very least, the competition's a lot harder now than it was when they qualified, and I don't know that everybody's, like, taking that fact into consideration.
That's also like that is a thing that you can bring from my point with Fear and amplified like 10 times here with Maryville. Because at least with Fear, you can argue Fear with the same roster can go head to head with the better teams. Not necessarily win against them, but go head to head because they already showed they could. But Maryville is a roster that is coming off of the NACL OQs. It's also going against the teams that are getting rebuilded, and then also going against NACL adversaries. Like, the amount of talent that they are going to go against is nothing like they have gone at all at both Silo and OQ. And they need to try and improve off of that, with the fact that they cannot make any changes, or at least as of now they can't, unless they change something big with getting a player into the university, and that way they can bring someone good. But, like, apart from that, it's looking really tough for Maryville, and there's not a lot of ways to try and change that around.
I guess the silver lining is going to next week, they'll get to play a lot of those teams that you guys just talked about, got to tweak their roster. I mean, they get a bout with Supernova, Wildcard, and AoE. So, talked about how they should against AoE, how they should compare against Team Fish Taco, Supernova being that similar boat in that vacuum Gordo talked about. I think week 2 will really settle where I think we feel as a whole with Maryville and Fear the most.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find the confirmation. Here's the EG series, I believe, will tell me what I'm looking to find here. No, it will not. But what I do want to call out also is it does seem like Maryville has had to sustain a coaching change is the other thing. I know Tej just graduated, so maybe that is why maybe he's just taking some time off post-graduation. Maybe he's going to be exiting, so they're trying to make that transition earlier. Maybe the second he graduates, he says goodbye, and I'm not the coach anymore. But their coach has been listed as CAC God. I do not know who that is.
I don't either, actually.
So one more round for the cope there for Nyarko is they are on a new coach, it does appear, at least. So maybe it makes a little bit of a difference versus how they approach draft and how they've prepped on this new patch.
I appreciate all the cope, guys. What I will say is that while you guys are bringing the cheer, I will throw a little bit of pessimism out there for maybe those who aren't as familiar with Maryville University. This is a massive oversimplification as to this last year of games that I've seen them play in. But there is kind of this feeling that I have that most of the time they are winning through obliterating weaker teams. They know how to play from ahead, and they know how to play when they are just feel like they're better players. But when push comes to shove, when they're up against evenly matched or maybe slightly better teams, they do lose, right? They mostly lose in those kinds of situations. And therefore, I am a little bit worried about what's going to happen throughout the course of the season. Maybe it's just a matter of readjusting, because they're obviously great players in their own right. You know, they jam a lot of solo queue. They know what it's like to be on the end of a comeback and stuff like that. So I am not super doomer on the front that they just don't know how to play from behind, or they don't know how to play against people who are their match. But I do feel like we saw a little bit of that lack of that volatility and that lack of kind of even-handedness in this first week, and I just hope that it improves and develops throughout the season. Otherwise, it's going to be a rough time.
Well, that's also the risk here. Like you were talking about the players, I think they have potentially 10th and 9th place players, pretty much. Not meaning that they are like just at that level, but comparing a skill level, I think that obviously Getback is the one that jumps into my head. I already kind of called it out in the first episode, but I think he's the weakest mid laner in the league. And then I think, as of now, Orange has looked like the weakest jungler as well. So when we were, like, think about how we started, right? Today, it's player of the week has been either jungle or mid laner. Or the callouts for player of the week has been either jungle or mid laner. If your mid lane or jungle are the weakest potential players in the league, that is going to make it even more difficult for that. And that's something that I always bring. Like, you cannot have the weakest mid laner because it just makes the game 10 times harder. You have to have a really good mid laner, or at least one that is serviceable enough.
Yeah,
That's a
I think
great
that's
point,
fair.
actually, to make.
Yep, I think that's definitely fair. And they're not. It's not like they're blowing the other positions out of the water either. So it's a tough position for them to be in for sure. That's a lot of time spent on Maryville. Let's spend a little bit of time on the meta. Let's talk about 13-11, 13-12, as well as I believe we're going to be on 13-12 this next week. If not, probably one more week before we get to it. And maybe just a little discussion on 13-11 meta, what we've seen so far, and how we feel like it's been impacting some of these teams.
It's just nuked and oversimplified the bottom lane draft board. 13-11 has. I'm most excited to see which AD carry player is going to drop off the most from what we're saying from the first 2 weeks to week 3, I guess would be the bench, if we're assuming that the test period for NACL is a week on a patch. So week 3 is what we're tending 13-12. Yeah, which AD carries have been, spamming Zeri, getting away with Zeri play, are going to look a lot shakier when they get thrown off of it, because Zeri is definitely going to get thrown off the most. Belio and also Yumi, so the supports may get taxed a bit too. The highest level of excitement I have, though, is I really hope this brings more engage-oriented play out of some of these support players. I know that Rel is getting tweaked in this patch as well, but it's mostly her damage numbers to try and tweak the rise of AP Rel jungle. I think Rel is still very, very powerful as a support engage champion. I really like the changes she got with the stun towards her Q. And we already know what a team fight threat she can be. Obviously, Nautilus is still seeing his fair share of play in the NACL, but that's mostly coming from APA in the mid lane and a couple of jungle plays. I hope to see Nautilus get a little more onus towards the bot side as well. So I hope we can really, because just sitting here as we've gone through, going back to what TDS said, we talk a lot about mid laners and junglers, right? We haven't really had a lot to talk about with support play yet, which is a little bit of a detrimental on us, but partly just where the meta is on 13-11. I hope that these changes that come through for 13-12 will let some of these supports that we talked up, like the Zazels on Disguise, be able to really perform to the level of we think they should be an LCS support, and also maybe expose supports that we called not great for the league, NXI role swapping, when the meta gets swapped.
I'm as sick of the Zero Yumi as everybody else. I do want to kind of call it a weird trend that I guess we're not going to get to see corrected if Zeri exits the meta, but at least becomes less of the insane 1v9 powerhouse that she is right now, is like I've seen there's like been a weird tendency this week of like a bunch of teams giving up Zeri and then drafting comps that have no way of dealing with Zeri. Like it's been very strange every time one of those drafts ends up going through, just to watch the Zeri eventually pop off and take over the game. And, you know, sometimes it's been the favorites on the Zeri, and that's been normal. Sometimes there's been upsets because of it. I think the draft that stands out the most to me that was like that was Wildcard AoE game number 1. Where Wildcard drafts a comp where that's the Karthus game. That's the Zamudo Karthus game.
Right.
And the only way that comp gets onto Zeri is by Flash Amumu ulting her. That is the only way that they have to deal with it. And so, of course, Lynx like has the pop off of his life and like hard carries the game, and it's very strange. And then and Wildcard, by the way, then apparently gets scared of doing their interesting comps and drafts 5 games of Gragas for Zamudo, who. Not to derail us too far here, but I'm so hyped on Zamudo after this week 1. But on the meta, I don't know. At the very least, now we won't get to see any more of these compositions, hopefully, where Zeri just 1v9s the game because of draft gap.
Well, Zeri is one thing. My expectation is maybe not to see death, but just to see as a trend, both Milio and Yumi to fall down quite a bit. I think Yumi probably disappeared, Milio fall down a bit. I still think that Enchanters are going to be strong enough, but the nerfs can be those sort of nerfs where it maybe isn't that much that they are taking away, but more so people believe that it is, and that just immediately pushed them away from actually playing. It has happened with a couple of champions where the nerfs are negligible, but it can push them out of the meta, and that can end up happening with some of the enchanters. I also think that as long as teams want to play around more of a engaged support meta, Nautilus it was already present even out of the support position, so he's going to stay there. I think Leon is going to make a comeback. Rakan as well wasn't never that bad, so you will have the engaged supports. And if that's the case, and the hyper carries like the Aphelios and the Seri drop out, and it's just the Jinx, if it comes, and also teams and players have already started playing a lot of Jhin. If it becomes back to Jhin meta, maybe an Ashe in between, I kind of expect the teams to get the most out of this are the teams that already have a really good top side to play around with. And that's kind of DSG, TLC, obviously, because Arrow for all his life has been essentially the Jhin Ashe player with Draven mixed in. But he was the Jhin Ashe player for when KT was good. So now TL will have a player that will be more comfortable in that spot, and then you have the best top side potentially of the league. So I'm already laying it out there. But I think DSG and TLC probably not going to suffer that much. I'm worried about Flycedo, because I think that Masu is much more of a hyper carry compared to the other 280 carries, and Flyce has a good amount of issues with their mid lane particularly. I think Spyrax has yet to impress in a way that you can really call out to Flyce to be one of the less affected by any of these changes. And if Masu can no longer hard carry, you're completely on Yuji and Zamudo. And I'm not sure if that's going to be enough against some of the tougher teams, right?
Yuji and Faisal, right?
Yeah, sorry, Yuji and Faisal.
Just making sure.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. I do hope the top lane meta doesn't get shifted up too much, though. I think we're in a really cool top lane area where, like, I think the best players are starting to really start to fold in the Renekton a little bit more. I love to see the Jax when it comes out. I still think, we talked about this off stream a little bit, at least Nyarko and I did, but, like, people like to complain about a champion when they see it too often, but there are good evergreen champions and there are bad evergreen champions, and I think Cassante is a good evergreen champion. He's got so much skill expression, he's got so much cool stuff you could do. There's always fun, flashy plays that that are unexpected and shock everybody. That's gonna be fun. I don't mind if Cassante gets to stay in the meta for a little bit. Maybe he could be knocked down a little bit. A little bit. Yeah, I'll give him a little bit, but But I don't like. If we go to Malphite meta, we're gonna be sick of that in like a day, guys. We're gonna be missing the Cassante if we go to Malphite Ornn again.
Yeah, we don't want Cho'Gath. We don't want Cho'Gath again.
Malphite Cho'Gath Cyan, good old times.
Yeah, no, people think that they want. You think that you want you think that you want Annie in the meta, but now you've had Annie in the meta. And did you really want Annie in the meta, or do you wish it was still Orianna and Silas and Akali? We all know the answer.
We've had some conversations around mid laners in this league that Certainly like Andy being in the meta right about now.
True.
Spyrex. Sorry.
Ooh. See, I like how everybody was BMing me on hating Spyrex before, but now I think I got a few people on the Spyrex train.
No, I'm not
not
hating
hate
Spyrex.
there,
I'm just saying
yeah.
he does like when
He
Andy's
loves
in the
that
meta.
Annie, man. He loves that Annie.
To quote Gordo,
For better or for worse.
To quote Gordo here, there's nobody in the NACL that can hit a Flash Tibbers combo like Spyrex.
Like Spyrex can, yeah. There's nobody that can flash and push their buttons like Spyrex can.
Is he the crying of an A? What? Is he like crying now?
Yeah, he might be. He
He's
might be
only an any player.
the crying of Anna. It could be. I can see that for sure. All right, we're getting close to the hour mark there, so let's look ahead to week 2 just a little bit and talk about some matchups that we're excited for, and then we'll close on out the episode. I'll give it to somebody else first. I've talked way too much already.
I've got I wrote one down. I'll get it quickly out of here so I don't over talk too much here. I think we talked a little bit about AoE, Darkwings, and Will, especially. I think they will be very much tested. We talked about a lot of teams. We're going to figure out how exactly they land actually in the league and the standings. I think AoE also slots into one of those teams because right out the gate, week 2, they are going to be taking on Fly Challengers and Disguise. So if AoE want to keep up the record they've held through 1 week, they're going to have to really show out against those 2 teams that we all believe are potential champions of the summer split.
I'm going to call upon the remaining Maryville University fans who have been beaten and battered as of late. It's been a past week of pain and suffering. We had a tough time in C-Level finals as well, but I'm going to tell them, keep the faith. Watch out for Maryville versus Wildcard. Keep the faith was really a bad turn of phrase for me. Now I'm thinking about CLG faith. I'm sorry. TDS, take it away.
Yeah, Fade hasn't really been on your side the last split either, so probably better not to call them out. So the obvious ones would have been the EGC series as well as the AoE ones, but I'm honestly really interested as well in the DSG wildcard after talking about wildcard, because we were talking about it, right? Technically they could have been 5-1 if not for a couple of corrections here and there. So they could be a really interesting matchup, especially going against DSG on the last game of the week. I think that one could be really, really promising and could tell us good amount of story about where Wildcard could be. I'm actually kind of interested in that one as well.
You know what? I didn't even realize it when we were making the point that Wildcard could have been 5-1, but Wildcard could have been 6-0 because the one is the Karthus draft, where the only way to get on Azeri is the Amual.
So they draft cap themselves in 2 games, basically.
They draft capped themselves in 2 games, and then the 3rd game was decided by a team fight where they got Dragon Soul and managed to lose it like way harder than expected.
That's true.
That's the thing, though. I think Wildcard is in their perfect rating because 3 really great games and 3 games that are so questionable that only Wildcard could have pulled them off. Like, that's Wildcard, essentially, right there.
Yeah, I guess you could call them a wild card in every matchup.
Huh. Boy, I wish I'd had this thought at the beginning of the episode. I would have been really on the wild card train here, but unfortunately we've gotten here organically over the course of an hour. So I don't know. Maybe that'll have convinced everybody at home along with me.
We can still watch the game with Wildcard and DSG, so it can still work out that way very well.
True. My team to watch for this next week. There's so many more weeks. For this next week is going to be Evil Geniuses. I think this is their big test to see do they really deserve to be up here at 4-2. They have a tough week. They have to play Flight Challengers and Disguised, both of whom are going to be really tough opponents for them. And if they can perform well, I'll be very comfortable calling them a top team. And if they get slammed, then the question will stay open. They do also play Cincinatti Fear, who I hope can make a comeback. But again, if they're a top tier team, I expect them to be able to do well against Fear as well. I mean, all 3 of those are teams that we had in the top 4 coming into the split. If Evil Geniuses performs well, I think we can put Evil Geniuses in the top 4.
I honestly think out of every matchup this week, Fear EG Challengers is going to be the banger, because I think it tells us the most about the league and not the league and those teams.
Fair. I think those, I definitely agree with that. It'll be an interesting turning point for the standings in that matchup in particular. So definitely a good one to stay tuned for. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Salt Mine. Thank you everybody for tuning on in. Been a lot of fun just breaking down the regular season. We're going to be back every week throughout the rest of it with Player of the Week and with our breakdown on the action. So We're going to see you guys next time. Stay tuned for those 30 games of NACL coming this weekend, and we will see you next time.